Let go of me. Her voice came out cracked barely above a whisper, but the words landed like a fist in the silence of that locked room. She pressed herself harder against the cold wall, clutching a torn badge against her chest, and when the door finally swung open, she didn't scream for help. She looked up at the stranger standing in the threshold and said the one thing nobody expected: "Please, don't call security." If you're new here, subscribe to this channel and follow this story all the way to the end, because what happens next will stay with you. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Damian Romano had not survived 43 years in this city by being careless about the things most people called coincidence. Other men in his position would have called the torn badge on the floor of the maintenance corridor a piece of trash. They would have stepped over it. They would have kept walking toward the elevator, toward the penthouse suite, toward whatever private business had brought them to the lower service level of the Astoria Grand at 2:47 in the morning. But Damian Romano was not other men. He crouched down without thinking. The instinct of a man who had learned 30 years ago that the smallest details were almost always the most important ones, and he picked up the badge. The plastic was cracked across the center. Someone had stepped on it, or thrown it, or dropped it in a way that told a story. The crack itself wasn't equipped to finish. The photo on the laminated face was scratched beyond recognition, but the name printed in clean black letters below the photo was still perfectly legible. Lily Carter, night attendant, floor 47. Damian turned the badge over in his hand once. Then he looked down the corridor. The door at the far end of the service hallway was wrong. Not visibly damaged, not visibly forced, but wrong in the way that only someone who had spent a lifetime reading spaces and bodies and silences could understand. The handle was not quite aligned with the strike plate. Someone had closed it in a hurry. Someone had closed it from the outside, and whoever was on the inside was not able to open it. He stood. He walked to the door. He pressed his hand flat against the surface, not to push it, but to listen. For 3 full seconds there was nothing. Then he heard it. Breathing. The kind of breathing that meant someone had been crying for a long time and had finally run out of sound. Damian reached into his jacket pocket. He kept a secondary key card for every floor of every property he owned, not because he was paranoid, though people who knew him well would argue otherwise, but because he believed a man who ran an empire needed to know every corner of that empire by heart. He ran the card over the reader mounted beside the door. The lock clicked. He opened the door slowly. The woman on the floor pressed herself back against the wall, immediately, one hand shooting up between them like a shield. The other arm pulled tight across her chest, where a crumpled piece of paper was balled against her uniform. Her uniform, a navy blue night attendant's jacket and pressed slacks, was torn at the shoulder seam. Not a snag, not a stumble. The tear was the kind that came from someone grabbing. Her left cheekbone was red in the way that was going to be a bruise before morning. She was staring at him with eyes that had already calculated exactly how much danger he represented. And the calculation had not finished in his favor. "Please," she said before he could speak. Her voice was hoarse and fractured, and completely steady at the same time, in the way that people got when they had been frightened long enough that the fear had calcified into something harder. "Don't call security." Damian stood in the doorway. He did not step fully into the room. He did not reach for his phone. He did not do any of the things a man in his position might have reflexively done, because he understood with the instinct of someone who had spent his entire adult life reading the room that every one of those reflexes would be the wrong one. Instead, he crouched down, not to get closer to her, not to use his size as a presence, but because he understood that a man standing over a woman who was already pressed against a wall was not a man offering help. He got down to her level, and he kept his hands visible, and he let the silence sit for a moment without filling it. "My name is Damian," he said. He watched her face. She was studying him with the intense focus of someone who had learned, probably the hard way, that first impressions were a luxury she couldn't afford. She was looking at his hands, at his collar, at the way he held himself. She was reading him the same way he was reading her, and the fact that she was doing it, that her brain was still working, that precisely even now told him something important about who she was. "You're not supposed to be down here," she said. She did not say it with accusation. She said it as a fact because it was one. The lower service level of the Astoria Grand was off limits to guests. It was accessible to staff and to the ownership offices, but management conducted their visits through the main administrative entrance, not through the maintenance corridors at 3 in the morning. "Neither are you," Damien said. Something shifted in her expression. It was subtle, barely a flicker, but it was there. She had expected him to deny it, or to explain it, or to immediately take control of the situation, in the way that powerful men always took control of situations. He had done none of those things. He had simply agreed. She looked at him for another moment. Then her eyes went to the door he was still holding open with one hand. "He's going to come back," she said. "Who?" "The manager." She paused. "Victor." She said the name the way people said names they had been afraid of for a long time. Not with heat, with distance. The deliberate distance of someone who had learned that you could not afford to be angry at the thing that had the power to destroy you. "Victor Hale," Damien said. Her eyes sharpened. "You know him." "I know everyone who works in my hotel." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of someone recalculating. Her chin lifted slightly, and for the first time since he had opened that door, the careful controlled blankness in her face cracked not into fear, into something more complicated. "This is your hotel," she said slowly. "Yes." "You're the owner." "Yes." She stared at him for what felt like a very long time. Then she said quietly, "Then you know what he's been doing." It was not quite a question. It was not quite an accusation. It sat in the air between them like something that had been waiting a long time to be said out loud. Damien Romano had walked into this corridor because of a broken badge on a concrete floor. He had opened a locked door because of breathing that sounded wrong. He was crouched on the floor of a maintenance room at 3 in the morning because a woman with a bruised cheekbone had asked him not to call security. And his instincts, the same instincts that had kept him alive and respected and untouchable for 2 decades, had told him to listen. And what he was hearing now was not a frightened woman making an accusation. It was a frightened woman telling him the truth. "Tell me what happened," he said. She looked at the door, then back at him, then at the crumpled paper still pressed against her chest. "If I tell you," she said, "it doesn't go away. You understand that once I say it out loud to someone, I can't take it back." "I understand. And I don't know you," she said. "I don't know if you're going to listen, or if you're going to do what the others did." "What did the others do?" Her jaw tightened. "They listened very politely, and then they made it worse." Damien said nothing for a moment. He let that land. He let her see that he had heard it. "I'm not going to pretend that I'm not a man with power," he said. "I'm not going to tell you that you can trust me without a reason. You don't know me. You shouldn't trust me without a reason." He met her eyes. "But I want to hear what you have to say. And I'm going to stay in this room until you're ready to say it. That's what I can tell you right now." Lily Carter looked at him, and Damien Romano waited. She had been working the night shift at the Astoria Grand for 14 months. She told him this, first the way people started with the safe parts of a story, before they got to the dangerous parts. 14 months. She had taken the position because the overnight differential pay was better, and because the nursing program she was enrolled in held its clinical rotations during daytime hours, which meant nights were the only time she could work. She was 29 years old. She had a younger brother named Marcus, who was 17 and living with their grandmother on the east side of the city. Her grandmother had a heart condition. The medical costs were not catastrophic, but they were consistent, and consistent costs required consistent income, and night shifts at a 4-star hotel paid better than day shifts at a diner. So here she was. She said all of this quickly and without self-pity. She was not telling him her history to make him feel sorry for her. She was telling him so that he would understand exactly how much she had to lose if things went wrong. Victor Hale had been the night operations manager at the Astoria Grand for 3 years. Lily had noticed him immediately. Not because he had done anything specific in those first few weeks, but because of the way he moved through a room. There was something deliberate about it, something that was aware at all times of where everyone else was. She had grown up in a neighborhood where she had learned early how to read that kind of awareness in a person, and the reading was never good. At first, she told herself she was being overly cautious, paranoid even. Victor was professional, efficient. He ran the overnight staff with a precision that upper management appreciated, and upper management's appreciation was communicated clearly and often in the form of favorable performance reviews and public acknowledgement at staff meetings. Victor was the kind of man that institutions trusted, and Lily had learned through experience that institutions trusted exactly the wrong kind of man. The first incident she witnessed directly involved a young woman named Priya, a college student working part-time, probably 20 or 21, picking up shifts while she finished her degree. Victor had called Priya into his office one evening just before the shift change. Lily had been passing in the hallway. She had not heard what was said, but she had seen Priya's face when she came out. She had seen that face before. She knew what it meant. She had also noticed in the weeks that followed that Priya's schedule changed. Her shifts became shorter. Her hours were reduced. And then one day Priya was simply not there anymore, and when Lily asked the other overnight staff about her, the answer she got was a shrug and a quiet, "She requested a transfer." Lily filed that information away. She started paying closer attention. There was an employee named Tomas who had worked overnight housekeeping for 6 years and had an unblemished record. After a single conversation with Victor in the manager's office, a conversation that Tomas described afterward to Lily as confusing and hostile for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, Tomas received a formal written warning for a policy violation that 3 other employees committed regularly without consequence. The warning went into his file. His application for a supervisory position was rejected 2 months later. The rejection cited disciplinary history. There was a woman named Dina in laundry services who had filed an informal complaint about the way Victor spoke to her during a supply inventory. The complaint was received by the HR department. Dina was called in for a meeting. She came out of that meeting having signed a document she described to Lily as a statement clarifying that the communication had been a misunderstanding. Dina had not understood fully what she was signing. The misunderstanding was recorded as resolved. Victor's record remained clean. Lily started writing things down. She did not have grand plans about what she would do with the information. She was not at that point building a case. She was simply documenting what she saw because she had a feeling, a deep, quiet, persistent feeling, that one day someone was going to ask questions and she wanted to be able to answer them. She kept the notes in a notebook at home, and she transferred the most important details to a document she kept on a personal USB drive separate from any hotel systems. She told Damien this, and she watched his face while she said it. He did not react to the word notebook the way guilty men reacted when they heard about documentation. He did not tighten. He did not recalibrate his expression. He simply listened, and the quality of his listening was different from the quality of listening she had encountered in HR offices and management meetings, and the 2 conversations she'd had with a supervisor who had told her both times that her concerns were being taken seriously. "How long were you keeping records?" Damien asked. "About 8 months. Did anyone know?" She exhaled slowly. "I thought I was being careful. But about 3 weeks ago, something changed." Victor started looking at me differently. Not in the way he'd looked at Priya or Dina or Tomas. It was... She paused, searching for the right word. Evaluating. Like he was deciding something. "Did he say anything to you?" "He called me into his office on Tuesday. This past Tuesday." She stopped. Her hands tightened on the paper against her chest. "He told me he'd been reviewing some of the overnight employee activity logs. He said there had been some unusual patterns in the way certain staff members had been using the hotel's shared computer terminals." She met Damien's eyes. "I used the terminals sometimes on break. I was logging notes from memory, just timestamps and descriptions. I never saved anything to hotel systems, but I had opened a document in the browser once weeks ago. I thought I'd closed everything completely. I was wrong. He found something. He found enough to know that I was documenting him." She swallowed. "He didn't say that directly. He never said anything directly. That was how he operated. He told me that employees who showed patterns of disengagement sometimes found their roles restructured. He told me the hotel valued team cohesion above all else. He told me that it would be unfortunate if someone who was so close to finishing her nursing certification were to experience a disruption in her employment status. She said it flatly, reciting it from memory. Every single sentence had two meanings, and he knew that I knew. And he knew that I couldn't prove anything because every word was deniable. Damien had gone very still. Not the stillness of someone who was surprised. The stillness of someone who recognized something precisely. Tonight, Lily said, I came in for my shift the same as always, 11 p.m. Everything was normal, except Victor kept showing up on floors I was assigned to. Not working, not managing, just appearing, and then disappearing. For about 2 hours. And then around 1 in the morning, he told me there was a situation in the lower service corridor that needed to be addressed. He said a guest had reported an issue with one of the supply closets. There was no guest report, Damien said. It was not a question. There was no guest report. She looked at him. When I went down here to check, he followed me. He told me to go inside. I told him I didn't see any issue. He told me to look more carefully. She stopped. Her voice did not break. She simply stopped and breathed, and then continued. When I turned around, he had locked the door from the outside. The room was very quiet. He came back twice, she said. The first time he talked through the door, told me that if I had any documentation anywhere, I needed to get rid of it. That if I thought about going to anyone, he had friends in HR and in management and in places I wouldn't expect. He told me that people in my position, people with family obligations, financial situations, academic programs that could be disrupted, people like me couldn't afford to be the kind of person who made enemies in the wrong places. She paused. The second time he came in, Damien's jaw set. He didn't hurt me badly, she said, and the way she said it, the matter-of-fact precision of it, the careful, clinical understatement hit harder than anything dramatic could have. He grabbed my shoulder. He made sure I understood that this was not a conversation, that I was not going to speak, that if I did speak, nothing I said would be believed, because he had already written a preliminary incident report describing an unstable employee who had been exhibiting concerning behavior and had been spoken to multiple times. He had already laid the groundwork. She finally looked down at the paper in her hands. I had a copy of some of my notes with me. I always kept a copy with me in case. He tried to take it. Her hands tightened. I didn't let him. Damien looked at the paper against her chest. What's on it? He asked. She finally unfolded it. It was a single page dense with handwriting, dates and times and initials organized in tight, careful rows. She had written in pencil, small and precise, every word, deliberate and controlled. 8 months, she said. 14 employees affected. 3 formal complaints that were modified before reaching HR records. 2 security footage requests that were denied at the management level before they ever reached legal review. And 1 name that appears in every single incident. She folded it again. Her eyes found his. Victor Hale. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Damien Romano had been in this business long enough to know the difference between a person who had fabricated a grievance and a person who had been carrying the truth so long that it had left marks on them. He knew the difference between someone who wanted something and someone who had simply run out of road. Lily Carter was not here because she wanted power or money or revenge. She was here because a locked door had run out of places for her to go. I need to ask you something, he said. She waited. The USB drive, the notebook, are they safe? She looked at him for a long moment. Then something in her face changed. Not trust exactly, but the beginning of something that might eventually become trust if it was treated carefully. Yes, she said. They're not here. Damien nodded. He stood slowly, giving her time to track the movement. Victor Hale has worked in this hotel for 3 years, he said. I'm going to tell you something that very few people know. I don't retain operational managers without comprehensive vetting. That vetting happens when they're hired, and it happens periodically afterward. And I am going to tell you right now that something about the pattern you've described, the protected complaints, the modified records, the access he has to systems that a night operations manager should not have access to, tells me that my vetting has been interfered with. Lily was very still. That means, Damien continued, that someone above Victor Hale is part of this. Someone with access to my organization's HR infrastructure. Someone who has been shielding him. That's what I was afraid of, she said quietly. That it wasn't just him. It's never just one person, Damien said. That's what they count on. The web is so wide that anyone who pulls on one thread looks like they're accusing everyone. And the person who looks like they're accusing everyone gets discredited. He looked at her directly. You've been doing this alone for 8 months. She nodded once, just once. You don't have to do it alone anymore, he said. It was the quietest thing he had said. But it was the thing that finally made her breath go unsteady, not from fear. From something else. From the exhaustion of someone who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and had just been offered the smallest possible measure of relief. She pressed her lips together. She blinked once hard. Why? She asked. Because you're right, he said. And because what you've described has been happening inside a building with my name on it, and I didn't know. And whether that's because I wasn't paying attention, or because someone made sure I couldn't see it. He paused. His voice was measured, even. But underneath the evenness was something that had edges. That ends tonight. She looked at him. She was not naive. She had not survived 14 months of working nights watching people get quietly destroyed by a system that smiled while it did it by being naive. She understood that this man in front of her was not a simple benefactor. She understood that he carried a name Romano that meant something in this city, and that what it meant was not simple, and that the things he was capable of were not simple either. But she also understood in the way that a person who has spent enough time in the dark learns to identify the genuine quality of light. She understood that what he had just said was true, and the truth, even when it came from an unexpected direction, was still the truth. She stood up. She straightened her torn uniform, the way people straightened their clothes when they were reminding themselves who they were. She looked at Damien Romano and said, "Then we need to talk about the others," because it had never only been about her. It had always been about the 14 names on that page. And right now, in a locked maintenance room at the bottom of a luxury hotel, with a bruise forming on her cheek and a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. Lily Carter finally had someone listening, and she was not going to waste it. Damien Romano had not become the most powerful man in this city by making decisions in the middle of the night based on emotion. He had built everything. He had every property, every agreement, every carefully maintained relationship on the principle that information came before action. Always, without exception. The men who acted on feeling were the men who ended up making mistakes they couldn't walk back. But standing in that maintenance corridor with Lily Carter, watching her straighten a torn uniform with the composed dignity of someone who refused to fall apart even when she had every right to. Damien felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt angry. Not the cold, manageable kind of anger that he used as a professional tool. The other kind. The kind that moved through a person's chest without asking permission. He kept it off his face. "The others," he said. "Tell me about them." Lily looked at him. She had made a decision, he could see that. She had weighed him the way she had been weighing everything and everyone for the past 8 months, and she had landed somewhere she wasn't entirely comfortable with, but understood was necessary. He respected that. He respected that she hadn't simply handed him her trust because he was standing in front of her in a good suit. 14 names, she said, across 14 months. Some of them I witnessed directly. Some of them came to me because word gets around in overnight staff people talk when they feel safe. And somehow, I don't know exactly when it happened, I became the person people talk to. Because you listened, Damien said. She looked slightly caught off guard by that. I suppose. And you documented. Everything I could verify, yes. Dates. Incident descriptions. Whether a complaint was filed. What happened to the complaint after it was filed. She paused. That last part was the most important, because in most cases the complaints didn't disappear. They were transformed, reworded, reclassified. A harassment complaint became a communication dispute. A hostile work environment report became a team dynamic review. The words changed. The record survived, but the meaning was gutted. Damien was quiet for a moment. Who handled the reclassification? I don't know who specifically made the changes in the system. I only know the outcomes and the pattern. She met his eyes. But the HR director's name appears on every final disposition document I was able to get my hands on. Sandra Fitch. He knew the name. Sandra Fitch had been in place for 4 years. She had come with strong references, a clean professional history, a reputation for running a tight, efficient HR function. Upper management liked her because she kept paperwork clean and complaints quiet. He had never had reason to look at her closely. Now he was looking. You said someone above Victor was protecting him, Lily said. Sandra Fitch had to know. She processed the paperwork. She signed the reclassifications. Either she knew exactly what she was doing, or someone told her what to sign, and she didn't ask questions. She stopped. Either way, she was part of it. Yes, Damien said. You don't look surprised. I'm not surprised, he said. I'm calculating. She watched him do it. He could tell she was not accustomed to seeing a person think in real time the way he was doing right now. Not the performed thinking of someone in a meeting pretending to consider what they'd already decided, but actual rapid architectural thinking. The kind that came from years of constructing very complex things out of very limited materials. What are you calculating? She asked. How wide the structure is, he said. Victor doesn't operate in isolation. You've already told me that. Sandra covers the records, which means someone gave Sandra the instruction or the protection to cover the records without fear of consequence, which means there's a third layer. He looked at her. In your 8 months of documentation, did you ever encounter a name above Sandra's? Any correspondence, any reference, anyone she reported to who seemed to have unusual involvement in what should have been routine HR functions? Lily was quiet for a moment. And the way she went quiet told him everything before she said the name. Gerald Marsh, she said. Damien's expression did not change. Gerald Marsh was the Astoria Grand's executive director. He had run the hotel's operations at the highest level for 6 years. He reported directly to Damien's organizational board, not to Damien personally, because Damien had learned long ago that managing a hotel at the operational level was a job for professionals with specific expertise, and his expertise lay elsewhere. Gerald Marsh was not a man Damien had ever had reason to distrust. Gerald Marsh was also a man who had on 3 separate occasions, in the past 2 years, brought Damien investment opportunities that had seemed attractive and turned out to be extraordinarily profitable, which meant Damien had rewarded him, which meant Gerald Marsh had leverage inside Damien's organizational trust structure that most people would have to work decades to build. What did you find on Marsh? Damien asked. His voice was perfectly even. Lily hesitated. I don't have direct documentation. What I have is a pattern. 3 times in the past year, complaints went through the standard HR pathway and were reclassified. In each of those 3 cases, the timeline shows that Sandra Fitch received an internal memo from the executive director's office within 48 hours of the complaint being filed. The memos were marked routine operational communication. They didn't reference the complaints directly. But the timing was the message, Damien said. Yes. He was still for a long moment. Then he said quietly, with the precision of someone stating a conclusion they would have preferred not to reach. Gerald Marsh has been in a meeting with me every Thursday morning for 6 years. He has sat across from me and given me performance reports and occupancy projections and guest satisfaction metrics. For 6 years. He paused. And while he was doing that, he was managing a system that was destroying the working lives of people employed under my name. Lily said nothing. She understood correctly that this was not a moment for commentary. The USB drive, Damien said. How quickly can you get it to me? She thought about it. I go off shift at 7. I can go home first, get it, and... No, Damien said. You're not finishing your shift tonight, and you're not going home alone. She stiffened slightly. Not out of fear, out of independence. He recognized the distinction. I'm not a person who needs to be managed, she said. I know that. I'm not managing you. I'm telling you that Victor Hale is going to come back to this corridor in approximately... He checked his watch. 20 minutes based on the pattern you described. When he comes back and finds this door unlocked and you gone, he is going to move. He's going to make calls. And the first person he's going to call is Sandra Fitch, who is going to call Gerald Marsh, who has the resources and the motivation to ensure that by morning, your documentation looks like the fabrication of an unstable employee. He met her eyes. So yes, I need you and that drive in the same place, and I need it to happen faster than they can respond. She stared at him. Then she said, "You've done this before." "I've dismantled systems that depended on people not moving fast enough. Yes." Another beat. "Okay," she said, "but I make my own calls." Agreed. She pulled her phone out. It was slightly cracked at the corner, a phone that had been dropped and not yet replaced the phone of someone who was careful with money. She made a call. 2 rings. Marcus. Her voice changed when she said her brother's name, not softer exactly, but more human. "I need you to go to Grandma's top dresser drawer. There's a small red USB drive in a cloth pouch. Don't ask questions, just..." A pause. She listened. "Yes now. I know it's late. I'll explain later. Take it out of the drawer, put it in your pocket, and stay at the apartment. Don't open the door for anyone except me." Another pause. "Marcus, I need you to do exactly what I'm saying." Her voice was steady, but he heard the thing underneath it. "I'm okay, I promise. I just need the drive to be safe. Can you do that for me?" A shorter pause this time. "Thank you. I love you." She hung up. She looked at Damien and said, "My brother is 17. He's good in a crisis. He won't panic." "You've raised him to handle things," Damien said. She looked at him with a kind of quiet surprise, as if she hadn't expected him to understand that so quickly. "Yes," she said. "I have." They left the maintenance corridor together. Damien took a route through the service hallway that bypassed the main corridors. He had not survived in his business by giving people warning. He kept Lily slightly behind him, not in a protective way, but in the way of someone who was navigating terrain. They needed to assess before exposing anything important to it. He had a contact in the building. Not hotel staff, someone else. A man named Carver, who handled security consulting for 3 of Damien's properties, and who understood the difference between the security a hotel advertised and the security that actually kept people safe. He sent Carver a text. The response came in 40 seconds. Already watching. "Hale's been in the manager's office for 12 minutes. He's on the phone." Damien showed the text to Lily without comment. She read it. Her expression did not change. "He's reporting," she said, "to someone who's awake at 3 in the morning, waiting for exactly this kind of call." Damien pocketed his phone. "Which tells you how established this arrangement is." She nodded slowly, and then she said something that stopped him. "Mia was the first," she said. He turned. "Before Priya, before Tomas, before all 14 names." She was looking at the middle distance the way people looked when they were pulling something forward from where they'd stored it far back, because it hurt to keep it close. Her name was Mia Okonkwo. She was 24. She'd been working here 3 months when Victor started making her life impossible. She filed a formal complaint. She was thorough. She had dates, times, written records of things he'd said. She was more prepared than she should have had to be. She stopped for a moment. "What happened?" Damien asked. She was called into a meeting with Sandra Fitch and one of the assistant managers. She came out of that meeting having signed a document agreeing that the incident had been a miscommunication due to cultural differences in workplace communication styles. That's the language they used. Cultural differences. Her voice was flat with a particular kind of fury that came from restraint, not absence. Mia is Nigerian American. She was 24 years old, and she had just spent 3 months documenting someone's harassment, and she came out of a meeting having signed a form that essentially said the problem was her background. She paused. They told her the form was routine, a formality, that it was for her protection. She believed them, Damien said. She wanted to believe them. She needed to keep her job. She had student loans. She had just signed a lease. Lily's jaw tightened. 2 weeks later, her hours were cut in half. 6 weeks after that, she applied for a position at another hotel, and her reference from the Astoria was flagged as unable to confirm positive performance history. She didn't get the other position. I helped her find one eventually somewhere else through a contact of mine. But the damage to her record, to her confidence, to her belief that institutions could be trusted, that didn't get fixed. She looked at Damien directly. I need you to understand that this is not about Victor Hale being a bad person. This is about a system that was constructed to protect him at the expense of people like Mia. And that system did not build itself. It required active participation from people with authority and access, people who made deliberate choices. Her voice did not waver. And I need you to understand that going after Victor without going after the system is not justice, it's maintenance. Damien Romano looked at Lily Carter for a long moment. He had heard many things in his career from many people. Proposals, arguments, pleas, demands. He had sat across from men twice his size and 3 times his net worth, and listened to them make cases for things they wanted, and he had evaluated those cases with the cold precision of someone who had never been able to afford sentiment in business. But what Lily Carter had just said was not a plea. It was a framework, and it was exactly right. You're not asking me to help you, he said. You're asking me to dismantle something. I'm asking you to use what you have to do what I can't, she said, because I've been doing what I can for 8 months, and a man locked me in a room to stop me. So yes, I need someone who can go somewhere I can't go. And what do you want when it's done? She thought about it. She actually thought about it, which told him she hadn't come into this with a rehearsed answer, which made the answer more true when it arrived. I want the records corrected, she said. Every complaint that was reclassified, I want it restored to its original form and properly reviewed. I want the employees who were pushed out to have documentation that accurately reflects what happened to them, not the version Victor's system created. I want the people who covered this to be held accountable. She paused. And I want to finish my nursing program without losing this job or any reference from this hotel, because I've worked here for 14 months and I've done my job well, and I'm not the one who should be losing something. Those are reasonable things, Damien said. I know they are. He almost smiled. Most people ask for more than they've earned. You're asking for exactly what you've earned. I've learned, she said quietly, that people who ask for exactly what they've earned still rarely get it. But I'm asking anyway. He pulled out his phone again and made a call. 2 rings. A man's voice alert, despite the hour. I need you at the Astoria Grand. Bring the documentation team. Full sweep HR record security system access logs. Internal communication archives. Manager correspondence, going back 3 years. Full sweep. Thomas. Tonight. A pause from the other end. Tonight. Before morning, Damien said. Before anyone who is currently awake and making phone calls has time to think. He ended the call. Lily was looking at him with an expression that was careful and assessing, and underneath both of those things, something that had not been there an hour ago. Your documentation team, she said. Who are they exactly? People I trust with information that could damage me if it got into the wrong hands, Damien said. Which means they're the most trustworthy people I know, because the only way I've kept them is by never giving them a reason to stop being trustworthy. She considered this. That's a strange kind of loyalty. It's the only kind that works, he said. They moved through the corridor toward the service exit. Damien kept his phone in his hand, tracking Carver's updates. Victor Hale had left the manager's office and was moving toward the lower level. He had someone with him, one of the overnight security staff, a man named Ruiz, who, according to Carver's next message, had been on Victor's informal payroll for at least 8 months. Not hotel payroll, Victor's payroll. Damien showed the message to Lily. She read it. Her face did not change. Ruiz, she said. I always thought there was something about the way he positioned himself. Near Victor's office, near certain employees. I thought I was reading into it. She looked at Damien. I wasn't. No, Damien said. You weren't. He was watching people, reporting back, making sure the parameters stayed clean. Damien pocketed the phone. Victor is more organized than I initially assessed. He had 3 years to get organized, Lily said. And he had people in place who made sure no one with the authority to stop him ever got the right information. Including me, Damien said. She looked at him carefully. Are you angry at yourself? Yes. Good, she said. And it wasn't cruel, it was honest. Because you should be. Not because it's your fault that he did what he did, but because the system he used to hide it ran on your authority without your knowledge. And that means he was using your name to protect himself. She paused. And that should make you angry enough to do this completely. Damien Romano stopped walking for one moment. Not because he was surprised by what she said. Because she was again exactly right. And in his experience, people who were exactly right twice in a row in a crisis were either very intelligent or very prepared, or both. Lily Carter, he was beginning to understand, was both. They reached the service exit. Damien's car was outside. His driver had been waiting since he arrived at the hotel, trained by long experience not to ask questions about unscheduled visits at unusual hours. Damien held the door. Lily stopped before going through it. I need to tell you something, she said. He waited. I have names on that drive that I haven't mentioned yet. 3 of them. They're not employees. She looked at him steadily. They're guests. The weight of that landed differently than anything else she had said. Damien understood immediately what it meant. Guests were not under hotel employment contracts. Guests were not subject to the internal complaint procedures that Victor had spent 3 years corrupting. Whatever had happened to them existed in a completely different legal and ethical territory. Victor, he said. Victor, she confirmed. 3 incidents, spread over 2 years. The guests didn't file formal complaints with the hotel. One of them told me directly she came back to the hotel a month later. I don't know why, maybe she thought she could face it. She told me she hadn't filed a complaint because she didn't think anyone would believe her. She told me she thought it was her word against an institution. Lily's voice did not shake, but her hands for the first time since he had found her on that floor were not entirely still. Her name is Patricia Wells, Lily said. She's 61 years old. She was traveling alone for the first time since her husband passed away. She was celebrating. That's how she described it, she was celebrating. Her daughter had encouraged her to take a trip. She stopped, breathed. She described exactly what Victor did, and she described exactly where, and she described the way he used his position and his uniform and the physical layout of that service corridor to make sure there were no cameras and no witnesses and no way for her to call for help without creating a scene that he could then use to make her look unstable. The air between them was completely still. The drive, Damien said. His voice was different now. Still controlled, but different. Patricia Wells's account is on the drive. She wrote it out for me, in her own handwriting, and she gave me permission to use it. She said, Lily stopped. Then she said it. She said she was tired of being afraid of what people would think. She said she was 61 years old, and she had spent her whole life being careful and being quiet, and being the kind of woman who didn't make trouble. And she said she was done. Damien Romano was not a man who was moved easily. He had built his life on the ability to stay functional in the presence of things that would have broken other people. But Patricia Wells was 61 years old, and she had gone on a trip to celebrate being alive, and someone who worked for him had hurt her in a service corridor of his hotel. We're getting that drive, he said. His voice was quiet, completely quiet. And then we're going to do this correctly. Every name, every incident, every person who looked the other way. He looked at Lily. All of it. She held his gaze. All of it, she said. Outside the city was still dark. There were maybe 4 hours before daylight. 4 hours before emails started moving and phones started ringing, and the people who needed the next 12 hours to cover their tracks would realize the window had already closed. As the car pulled into traffic, Lily looked out at the city moving past them, the streetlights, the empty sidewalks, the few lit windows in the buildings they passed. She had come into this night believing she was alone. She had believed that because the evidence up to this point had supported that belief. The evidence was changing. She turned from the window and found Damien watching her with the focused attention of a man who was already 3 moves ahead of the current moment. The people on that drive, she said. The ones Victor hurt. They're going to have to be told what's happening. Yes, he said. Some of them are going to be afraid. After this long, after being told their complaints didn't matter, or that they'd misunderstood, or that it was their own fault for... She stopped. Started again. Some of them are going to be hard to reach. Then we reach them carefully, Damien said. And we don't rush them. And we make sure that whatever they decide to do, they have accurate information and real support before they decide. He paused. No one moves forward in this without choosing to. That's not negotiable. She looked at him. She was still not sure entirely who this man was. She understood his reputation. She understood that his world operated by rules that were not the rules that most people lived by. She understood that his help was not simple, and that his presence in her situation was not a guarantee of anything clean or uncomplicated. But she also understood that he had crouched down on the floor of a maintenance room and listened to her, and that he had understood what she said, and that when she had pushed back about being managed, about whose decision this was, about what the goal actually needed to be, he had not dismissed her. He had agreed. And right now, at 4 a.m, with a bruise forming on her cheek, and a brother holding a USB drive 30 blocks away, and 14 names that deserved better than what they had received right now, that was enough. Okay, she said. She faced forward. The city kept moving. And somewhere behind them, in the lower service corridor of the Astoria Grand, Victor Hale opened a locked door and found an empty room, and understood for the first time that something had changed in a way he was not going to be able to fix. Victor Hale stood in the empty maintenance room for 11 seconds. Damien's man Carver had been counting. The text came through at 4:08 a.m. He's back in the corridor. He knows she's gone. He's not panicking yet, but he will be. Damien read the message in the back of his car and said nothing. Lily was beside him, her phone pressed to her ear, listening to her brother confirm that the USB drive was in his hand and the apartment door was locked. When she hung up, she caught Damien's expression and read it accurately. He found the room empty, she said. Yes, she absorbed this without visible fear. What moved across her face was something more complicated, the particular alertness of someone who understood that the clock had just changed. How long before he moves? He's already moving, Damien said. The question is which direction. It turned out Victor Hale moved in 3 directions at once. The first call he made was to Sandra Fitch. Carver had eyes on the manager's office and audio on the corridor line, not through any channel that required a warrant, but through the kind of access that came with owning the building outright, including its communication infrastructure. Sandra answered on the second ring, which meant she had not been asleep. She had been waiting. The call lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, Sandra was already at her computer, inside her apartment, on the 12th floor. She lived in the residential annex, connected to the hotel, one of the executive perks Gerald Marsh had approved, and she was accessing the hotel's HR database remotely. The second call Victor made was to Ruiz. Shorter, more direct. Ruiz was told to review the overnight security footage from the lower service level and ensure that any footage from the past 90 minutes was flagged for a routine technical review. Footage flagged for technical review was automatically quarantined from standard access for 72 hours while the system ran diagnostics. In 72 hours, a great many things could be accomplished. The third call Victor made was to a number that Carver sent Damien with 3 words attached. Not hotel infrastructure. A personal cell. Prepaid most likely. The kind of number that did not appear in any employee contact directory or organizational chart. Damien forwarded the number to Thomas. Thomas had been running Damien's documentation and intelligence function for 9 years. He was not a dramatic person. He did not deal in intimidation or theater. He dealt in precision, the acquisition, organization, and strategic deployment of accurate information. He had built 3 successful legal cases and dismantled 2 organized attempts at corporate fraud within Damien's business interests, and he had done all of it without ever raising his voice or appearing in a single public record. Thomas called back in 7 minutes. The number belongs to a burner registered through a prepaid account purchased 14 months ago at a convenience store on the east side. He paused. but it's been in contact with a registered cell belonging to one Gerald Marsh 14 times in the past 6 months. The contact pattern clusters around specific dates. Another pause. 3 of those dates correspond exactly to complaint filing events in the hotel HR system. Damien was quiet for one beat. So Marsh knew in real time, he said, within hours of each complaint being filed. Yes. He ended the call. Lily had heard enough to follow the shape of it. Marsh was getting alerts, she said. Every time someone filed something, Victor called the burner, and Marsh knew before the complaint even reached Sandra's desk. Before it reached anyone, Damien confirmed. Which means the reclassifications weren't reactive, they were pre-planned. By the time a complaint reached Sandra Fitch, she already had instructions. He looked at Lily. Your instinct was right. Marsh isn't just a passive participant. He's the architect. She was silent for a moment. Then, he's been in this hotel for 6 years. Yes. And in 6 years, how many? She stopped herself. She didn't finish the question because she didn't want the answer yet. She filed it for later in the way that people who were holding a great deal together learned to file things, compartmentalize now, feel later, keep moving in the present. Damien respected that. The car reached her neighborhood 20 minutes later. Marcus was waiting exactly as she'd told him to be inside, door locked, drive in hand. When she went upstairs, Damien waited in the car. He had offered to come with her. She had declined. He understood. This was her brother, her home, her space, and she was not going to have a powerful stranger standing in it in the middle of the night regardless of the circumstances. She was back in 8 minutes. She handed him the USB drive through the open window. It was small, a simple gray rectangle in a worn cloth pouch, and it contained, as far as he could tell from the weight of how carefully she passed it to him, everything. There's also a second file, she said, getting back into the car. A text document I encrypted. The password is a sequence I'm going to give you verbally right now, and you're going to remember it and not write it down. Damien looked at her. He was, despite everything, almost amused. You encrypted it. I watched 3 tutorials online, she said without a trace of apology. I wasn't going to put Patricia's account somewhere anyone could just open it. What's the password? She told him. 8 characters, a combination that was specific and memorable for reasons that were personal to her, the kind of password no algorithm would guess and no social engineering would produce. He committed it to memory without writing it down. There's something else on that drive, she said. Her voice had changed slightly, not quieter, more deliberate. Tell me. About 6 weeks ago, I was going to stop. The whole thing. I'd been doing it for 8 months, and I was exhausted and scared, and I had almost convinced myself that the smartest thing I could do for Marcus and my grandmother was to keep my head down and finish my nursing program and get out. She looked at her hands. And then I had a conversation with a woman in the hotel laundry service. Her name is Rosa. She's 53. She's been at that hotel for 9 years. She told me what happened to her 2 years ago before I ever started working there. She told me she hadn't told anyone because she'd seen what happened when people told someone. A beat. She had 2 years of silence stored up, and she gave all of it to me in 20 minutes in the break room because she said she could tell I was the kind of person who would do something with it. And you didn't stop, Damien said. I couldn't stop after that, not anymore. She looked at him. Rosa's account is on the drive. Her signature is on it. She knows. She wants it used. Thomas called again at 4:41 a.m. His team was already inside the hotel's administrative system's legitimate access because Damien had executive owner credentials to every system in every property. He owned credentials he almost never used personally, and that existed precisely for moments like this one. Thomas's team was pulling HR records, communication log, system access, timestamps, and every modification made to any complaint-related document in the past 4 years. How long? Damien asked. For the initial pull, 2 hours. For a clean analysis, you could put in front of a lawyer or a board 6 to 8 hours. Thomas paused. Damien, I need to tell you something. Tell me. We're finding modification timestamps on HR records that go back further than 3 years. The earliest one I've located so far is 4 years and 9 months ago. Another pause. That predates Victor Hale's time at the hotel. The silence in the car was absolute. Lily turned to look at Damien. He kept his voice level. What are you saying, Thomas? I'm saying that the system that protected Victor Hale may not have been built for Victor Hale. Thomas's voice was measured, careful, delivering difficult precision with the steadiness of someone who had learned that the way you delivered bad news was as important as the news itself. Someone built this structure before he arrived. Victor may have been placed into it, or he may have found it and used it. Either way, this goes back further than your current manager, and that means the question of who built the original structure is still open. Damien ended the call. He sat with what Thomas had just told him for exactly the amount of time he could afford, which was not long. Lily was looking at him with the focused intensity of someone who had just revised their map of the territory in real time and was already recalculating. It's older than Victor, she said, by nearly 2 years. So when Victor came in, he either inherited it or was specifically placed to use it. Damien's jaw was set. Neither option is better than the other. Both options mean Marsh's involvement predates everything I've been told. And if it predates Marsh's time at the hotel. She stopped. How long has Marsh been in that position? 6 years. And the earliest modification is 4 years and 9 months ago, which puts it inside his tenure, Damien said. So Marsh built it, or Marsh was handed it by whoever had the position before him. He paused. The person who had the executive director position before Marsh was a man named Arthur Kellner. He left voluntarily, relocated. Good reference, clean exit. He said this slowly. I recommended him for his next position. Lily heard what was underneath that sentence. You trusted him. I helped him leave, Damien said. Which means I may have helped someone who built this structure find safe passage out of it before it could be traced back to him. The thing about this particular revelation was that it hit Damien in a place that was not about business. It hit him in the place where pride lived, not arrogance, not ego, but the deep, quiet pride of a man who believed that the one thing he was genuinely good at was seeing the truth of a situation before anyone else did. The idea that someone had operated inside his trust, had used the resources and credibility of his name, and had done it so cleanly that he had helped them exit rather than expose them. That was not simply a professional failure. That was personal. Lily seemed to understand this. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, you couldn't have known without evidence. That's what the system was designed to prevent. I know, he said. Knowing that doesn't make it easier. No, he said, it doesn't. Another call from Carver. Victor Hale had left the hotel at 4:53 a.m. He had not been scheduled to leave until 7:00. He had told the front desk supervisor that a family emergency required him to leave early and that he had made arrangements for overnight coverage. The front desk supervisor had accepted this without question because Victor was a manager, and managers did not get questioned by front desk supervisors at 5 a.m. But Carver had tracked his car. Victor was heading east, toward a residential neighborhood that Thomas, running parallel searches, confirmed within 4 minutes was the location of Gerald Marsh's private home. He's going to Marsh in person, Lily said. He's panicking, Damien said. People who are panicking make decisions that are faster than they are smart. What do we do? Damien thought for exactly 3 seconds. Then he made a call, not to Thomas, not to Carver, but to a man named Elias, who handled a different category of problem entirely. Elias had a professional relationship with 2 senior partners at the city's most respected employment law firm. A relationship built over years of Damien routing legitimate legal business in their direction. He also had a direct line to a woman named Judge Carol Wentworth, who had on 2 separate occasions found Damien Romano's documentation thorough enough to act on quickly. Elias, Damien said when the call connected. I need someone at the City Employment Law Commission when their offices open at 8 a.m. I need a formal filing prepared tonight, and I need you to reach Wentworth through the back channel. He paused. Tell her I have a guest victim statement, signed, written in the victim's own hand. She'll understand what that means. A beat from Elias. How bad is it? It goes back 5 years, Damien said. And it has my hotel's name on every page of it. Elias went quiet for a moment. Then, "I'll have someone at the commission at 7:50. Give me 2 hours on Wentworth." Damien ended the call. Lily had been listening to this without expression. When he lowered the phone, she said, "You're filing before they have a chance to move the records. The records Thomas is pulling right now will be submitted as part of the filing. Once they're part of an official legal process, no modification made after this moment is admissible as original documentation. Everything Sandra Fitch has been doing in the past hour is now evidence of tampering, not evidence of cleanup." Lily was quiet. Then, "You knew the moment Thomas told you she was accessing the system remotely." "I knew what she was trying to do, yes. And you let her keep doing it." "Every modification she makes tonight is time-stamped," Damien said. "She's building the case against herself." Lily looked at him with an expression that was not quite admiration and not quite unsettled, and was probably some precise combination of both. "You're not just dismantling this," she said. "You've been 3 steps ahead since we left the hotel." "2 steps," he said. "You were already 1 step ahead when I found you." She did not deflect the acknowledgement. She accepted it with the same steady directness that she brought to everything, and then she moved on, because they did not have time for anything that wasn't functional. "The people on that drive," she said. "I need to be the one to contact them. Not your team. Not lawyers. Me. Some of them only told me because they trusted me personally. If a stranger calls them at 8 in the morning and says this is happening, some of them are going to shut down." "Agreed," Damien said. "I need their names protected until each one of them individually consents to being part of whatever official process this becomes." Thomas's team operates under confidentiality agreements that have held up in court. Their information does not move without their individual consent. That's not a courtesy, it's a legal constraint I put in place precisely because this kind of situation is the reason these processes exist. She nodded. Then, "Rosa. I want to call Rosa first. She's the one who kept me going when I almost stopped. She deserves to know before anyone else that something is actually happening." Damien handed her his phone. "Use this line, it's clean." She took it. Dialed from memory, she had Rosa's number stored in her head, not in any phone, because she had understood instinctively that a phone could be accessed and a memory could not. She waited through 3 rings. When Rosa answered, her voice was immediately awake and alert, in the way of someone who had been sleeping lightly for a very long time. "It's Lily," Lily said. A beat. "Lily." Rosa's voice changed on the name, softened and tightened at the same time. "What time is it?" "Almost 5. Rosa, I need you to listen to me." Her voice was quiet and completely steady. "It's happening. What we talked about, it's happening. Tonight. You're going to get a call later this morning from someone I trust. I need you to be ready." A long pause. Then Rosa said in Spanish first, and then in English, "Está pasando de verdad. It's really happening." "You're sure?" "I'm sure," Lily said. Another pause. Damien could hear faintly the sound of Rosa breathing on the other end of the line, the sound of 9 years of silence deciding whether it trusted the next 5 minutes. "Okay," Rosa said. "Okay, I'm ready." Lily handed the phone back to Damien. She did not say anything. She did not need to. They were 15 minutes from the hotel when Thomas called again. His voice was different this time. Still controlled, but carrying the particular quality of a person who has found something they did not expect and is processing the weight of it in real time. "I need to tell you what I just pulled from the guest incident archives," Thomas said. "Go ahead." "The 3 guest incidents Lily documented. I've cross-referenced them against the hotel's internal incident reporting system." He paused. "All 3 were filed. The guests did report. Not directly to the hotel, 2 of them reported through the city's hospitality industry complaint line, and 1 reported through a guest satisfaction platform the hotel uses for reviews." A longer pause. "All 3 complaints were routed to the hotel's management for response. All 3 received the same response, a formal letter from Gerald Marsh's office, indicating that the matter had been reviewed, that the employee in question had no prior history of similar complaints, and that the hotel took guest experience seriously, and would conduct an internal review. A beat. No internal review was ever conducted. The complaints were marked resolved. Marsh signed off personally on each closure. Damien said nothing for a moment. Thomas, he said. Patricia Wells. Her complaint specifically. Filed 18 months ago, Thomas said. Closed by Marsh's signature 21 days later. No investigation. No contact with the complainant after the initial form letter. The complaint is marked. He stopped. He actually stopped mid-sentence, which was not something Thomas did. It's marked, guest relations resolved via standard hospitality courtesy protocol. What does that mean? It means they sent her a gift card, Thomas said. A $200 gift card to the hotel restaurant, and marked her complaint as resolved. The silence in the car lasted 4 full seconds. Lily had heard enough to understand. Her expression was the expression of someone who has already been furious for a long time and has just been handed one more thing that confirms exactly how justified that fury is. She was 61 years old, Lily said. Her voice was even, completely even. She was traveling alone for the first time since her husband died, and they sent her a gift card. Yes, Damien said. She turned and looked out the window at the city. She was giving herself exactly the amount of time she needed to absorb this without letting it become something that interfered with what came next. Damien watched her do it. He recognized the discipline of it. We're going to need Patricia Wells contacted directly, she said, still facing the window. Not through a form, not through a law firm's letterhead. A person. Someone who treats her like a person. She turned back to him. I want to be the one to call her. Yes, Damien said, without qualification. And I want her to know that the gift card and the form letter and the 21-day closure, I want her to know that someone saw what was done to her and called it what it was. I'll make sure she knows, Damien said. Whatever she decides to do with the information, she'll have it accurately. They pulled up to the Astoria Grand at 5:22 a.m. Thomas's team was already inside. 3 people Damien had learned a long time ago that precision required small teams, and small teams required exceptional individuals, not large ones, moving through the administrative offices with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this before. Filing cabinet by filing cabinet. System folder by system folder. Sandra Fitch had stopped accessing the HR database at 5:07 a.m. The last modification she had made before stopping was to a document in Mia Okonkwo's file, the 24-year-old who had been the first. She had attempted to remove a time-stamped internal memo from Mia's record. The attempt had triggered a system log. The system log had been captured by Thomas's team at 5:04. Sandra Fitch did not know the system log existed. She was about to find out. Damien walked into the hotel with Lily beside him. The overnight staff who saw them registered the unusual hour and the owner's presence with the careful blankness of people who had learned that the right response to something unexpected was to keep doing their jobs and let the situation explain itself. Lily looked at the lobby, the space she had moved through 5 nights a week for 14 months. The space she had learned to navigate with the particular efficiency of someone who treated every corner of it as a work environment rather than an aesthetic experience. She looked at it differently now. Not with fear. Fear had been the dominant note since the moment Victor Hale had turned a key in a lock and left her in the dark. But fear was not the dominant note anymore. Something had replaced it. Not quite anger. Not quite relief. Something that felt, if she was honest with herself, a great deal like purpose. Damien stopped at the entrance to the administrative corridor and turned to her. From here, he said, things are going to move quickly. Thomas's team will brief us on the complete record pull within the hour. Elias will have a legal framework ready before 9. By mid-morning, the people who have been running this system will receive formal notification that they are under investigation. They will have lawyers. He looked at her steadily. And when they have lawyers, they are going to look for a way to reframe this. They are going to try to introduce doubt about the reliability of the documentation, about the credibility of the people who filed complaints. About me, she said. About you specifically, he said. Because you're the one who held this together. And attacking the person who held it together is the first move that every defensive legal strategy makes. She held his gaze. What do you need from me? "I need everything you did to be exactly as documented as it already is," he said. "Your 8 months of records, the encryption, the way you handled every piece of information. You did this carefully, Lily. Carefully enough that what you built can hold weight in a formal process." He paused. "But I need you to be prepared for the part where they try to make it about you instead of about them." "I've been prepared for that for 8 months," she said. "That's why the records are what they are." He looked at her. "You built this like you were going to court," he said. "I built this like I was going to need it to survive," she said. Court seemed like the optimistic version of the outcome. And then from down the corridor, Thomas appeared in the doorway of the administrative office with a tablet in his hand and an expression that meant something significant had just landed. "Damien," Thomas said. He looked at Lily, then back at Damien. "Both of you should see this." They walked toward him together. What Thomas had found was on the tablet screen a communication thread pulled from Gerald Marsh's executive email archive, recovered from the hotel's server backup, before Sandra Fitch's remote access had been able to touch it. The thread was between Marsh and Arthur Kellner, his predecessor. The oldest message in the thread was dated 5 years and 3 months ago. Damien read the first line of the oldest message. Then he read it again, because what Arthur Kellner had written to Gerald Marsh in a private email on a hotel server that he had apparently believed would be deleted when he left was not a professional communication. It was an instruction. Specific, detailed, and explicit in a way that left absolutely no room for the interpretation that any of what followed was accidental or informal. It was a manual. Arthur Kellner had written Gerald Marsh a manual for how to run the system, how to manage complaints before they reached formal channels, how to identify which employees were most likely to file, and how to preemptively limit their credibility, how to maintain Marsh's personal distance from any specific incident while ensuring the outcome he needed, which HR functions to control directly, and which to leave visible as a show of institutional integrity. How to make the whole apparatus look like standard professional management while operating it as something else entirely. And at the bottom of the first message, Arthur Kellner had written, "The key is that it never looks like a system. The moment it looks like a system, it becomes evidence." Lily was reading over Damien's shoulder. When she finished, she straightened up. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said very quietly in the voice of someone who has just had 8 months of doubt resolved in a single paragraph, "It was always a system." "Yes," Damien said. "They knew it was a system. They designed it to not look like one. That was the whole design." "Yes." She looked at the screen, then at Thomas, then at Damien. "How many hotels does your organization own?" she asked. The question landed in the room and did not leave it, because Damien Romano understood immediately what she was. Anyone else. Whether the system that had been running for 5 years in one hotel had been replicated anywhere else in any other property under any other name. He had never asked that question before tonight. He was asking it now. "Thomas," he said. His voice was completely steady. "I need you to run the Kellner search across all properties, every administrative archive, every server backup." He paused. "Tonight." Thomas was already reaching for his phone, and Lily Carter, standing in the administrative corridor of the hotel, where someone had locked her in a room and told her that nobody would believe her, understood for the first time the full size of what she had walked into. She had come into tonight with 14 names. She might be leaving with something much larger. Thomas's search across all properties took 4 hours and 19 minutes. Damien spent most of that time in the hotel's executive conference room with Lily. A pot of coffee between them that neither of them touched after the first cup, and a growing stack of printed documents that Thomas's team kept bringing in at intervals each delivery, quiet, each stack larger than the last. Lily used the first hour to make calls. She had a list in her head, not written anywhere, stored in the precise, organized memory of someone who had understood for a long time that the safest place to keep critical information was somewhere no one else could access without her consent. She called 7 people before 7 a.m. Some calls lasted 4 minutes. Some lasted 12. Every one of them ended the same way, with the person on the other end saying something that translated, regardless of the specific words they chose, into, "I didn't think this day was actually going to come." Damien listened to enough of the calls to understand who Lily Carter was, to the people she had been quietly protecting for 8 months. She was not a crusader to them. She was not a hero figure. She was simply the person who had believed them when nobody with any power to act on that belief had. She was the person who had said in various ways across various conversations, "Over 8 months I hear you. I wrote it down. It matters." And that had been enough not to fix anything, not to undo anything, but to make the isolation of it slightly less total. I understood watching her that this was its own kind of power. Not the kind he had built his life around, but real. Rosa called back at 6:47 a.m. without being prompted. She had spent the 90 minutes since Lily's first call doing something practical and specific. She had gone to the storage unit she rented on the east side of the city and retrieved a sealed envelope she had placed there 2 years ago. Inside the envelope were 3 items: a handwritten account of what had happened to her, a photograph of a bruise on her forearm, dated by a doctor's appointment slip from the same week, and a note she had written to herself that said in her own handwriting, "In case someone ever asks, someone will ask." She had written that note 2 years ago, when she still believed it was probably not true. When Lily told her what was in the email archive about Kellner's manual, about the deliberate architecture of the system, Rosa was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I always knew it wasn't just Victor. I always knew someone taught him." "Someone built it before him," Lily said. Rosa exhaled. 2 years I kept that envelope. My daughter thought I was being paranoid." A pause. "Can I tell her now that I wasn't paranoid?" "Yes," Lily said. "You can tell her now." Damien was looking out the window when Thomas came in at 7:31 a.m. and placed a single printed document on the table between them. He did not make a speech about it. He simply put it down and stood back. Lily picked it up first because she was closer. She read the first page, then the second. Then she put it down very carefully, the way people put down things that are heavier than they look. 2 other properties, she said. Meridian Suites on the north side, Thomas confirmed, and the Caldwell Park Hotel in the business district. He paused. Arthur Kellner's manual appears in the administrative archives of both. The Meridian implementation dates to approximately 3 years ago. The Caldwell Park implementation is more recent, about 18 months. Damien turned from the window. "Who are the executive directors at Meridian and Caldwell Park?" he asked. He asked it the way you asked a question when you already suspected the answer was going to change something permanent. "Meridian's executive director is a man named Paul Carew," Thomas said. "He came from the Astoria Grand 4 years ago. Marsh recommended him personally for the position." A beat. "Caldwell Park's executive director was appointed 18 months ago. Her name is Dana Yu. She came with references from 2 previous hospitality positions." He paused. "One of those positions was under Arthur Kellner." The room went completely quiet. Lily looked at Damien. He was not visibly angry. He was doing the thing she had watched him do several times now, going internal, running the architecture of it, mapping what each new piece meant for the structure of the whole. She had learned over the past several hours to read that stillness as the most active version of him. "It's a network," she said. "It became one," Damien said. "Whether it started that way or evolved, it became one." He looked at Thomas. "How many complaint records across the 3 properties?" Thomas glanced at his tablet. 47 modified or reclassified records across all 3 locations, 31 individual employees affected, 11 guest complaints that were formally closed without investigation. He paused. "Those are the confirmed numbers from what we've pulled so far. There may be additional records that were fully deleted rather than modified, which would not appear in the current archive sweep." Damien absorbed this. 31 employees, 11 guests, 3 hotels, 5 years. He had sat in board meetings and reviewed quarterly performance reports and shaken hands with the people who built and maintained this system. He had told himself and believed, genuinely believed, that the due diligence he applied to his business interests was thorough enough to prevent exactly this kind of rot from developing. He had been wrong, and the wrongness of it was not abstract. It had names. It had a 61-year-old woman named Patricia Wells, who had received a gift card. It had a 24-year-old named Mia Okonkwo, who had signed a document she didn't understand. It had Rosa, who had kept a sealed envelope in a storage unit for 2 years, because she had maintained against all evidence the fragile hope that one day someone would ask. "I need a moment," Damien said. He said it quietly, without theater. He walked to the far side of the room. Lily watched him go. She understood. She gave him the moment without comment, without following, without filling the space with anything. Thomas looked at her. He was not a man who showed much. But in the look he gave her now, there was something that was not quite respect and not quite gratitude. Something in between, the specific acknowledgement of someone who understood what it had cost to build what she had built and what it would have cost the world if she hadn't. She gave him a small nod. He returned it. Damien came back to the table 30 seconds later. Whatever the moment had been for it was finished. He was back in the mode that he operated best in, forward-facing, precise moving. "Elias," he said, pulling his phone out. "What's the status on the commission filing?" Elias answered on the first ring. "My associate is at the Employment Law Commission now. The filing package is ready. Astoria Grand documentation. Thomas's archive pulled the modified complaint records and the Kellner email chain. Judge Wentworth reviewed the guest victim statement last night." A pause. Damien, she called it one of the most clearly documented cases of institutional suppression she had seen in 15 years on the bench. "She's authorizing a formal investigative hold on all 3 properties' HR systems. Nothing gets modified, deleted, or accessed without commission oversight from this point forward." "When does the hold activate?" "It's already active as of 8:04 a.m. Damien checked his watch. 8:11 a.m. Sandra Fitch had stopped modifying records at 5:07 a.m. Every change she made after midnight was time-stamped and captured. And now, at 8:04 a.m., the window had closed permanently. Whatever the system had looked like when the hold activated was the version of the record that would stand. "There's one more thing," Elias said. His voice shifted. Not dramatic, Elias was constitutionally incapable of drama, but careful in a way that signaled the next piece was significant. "Wentworth asked me to pass something along directly," she said, and I'm quoting her, "Tell Mr. Romano that the victim statement from Patricia Wells contains a detail that will require him to be prepared for this to become a criminal matter, not just a civil or administrative one." The line was quiet for a beat. "What detail?" Damien asked. She didn't specify. She said the statement speaks for itself and that you should read it fully before the 9 o'clock meeting. Damien ended the call. He looked at Lily. "Patricia Wells's statement, the encrypted file." "Yes." He pulled out the USB drive. Thomas had a secured laptop ready. Damien typed in the password Lily had given him, the 8 characters precise and personal, and the file opened. He read it. It took 6 minutes to read. He did not speak while he read. His expression did not change in any dramatic way. But Lily, watching him, saw the exact moment he reached the detail that Judge Wentworth had flagged, because something in his posture shifted. A very small shift. The kind that a person only made when something had just reclassified in their mind from terrible to criminal. He finished the document. He closed the laptop. He looked at Lily. "Did you read this fully?" he asked. "Yes." When she described what happened in the service corridor, he said, the specific detail about the key card, the way he used the hotel's master system to lock the external camera feed before he followed her in. "She documented it precisely," Lily said. "She's an accountant. She noticed the small red indicator light on the camera housing change from green to red, while Victor was still in the corridor with her. She noted the time. She noted that the light had been green when she arrived on the floor." She paused. She didn't know what it meant at the time. She just wrote down what she saw. "It means he accessed the hotel's camera system from a manager-level panel," Damien said, "which means the act was premeditated. He chose the location, disabled the recording, and then proceeded." His voice was precisely controlled. "That is not a civil matter. That is not an HR complaint. That is a criminal act with documented time-stamped evidence." Lily nodded. "I know what it is." "Why didn't you lead with this?" he asked. Not accusatory, genuinely asking. Because I knew if I led with the most extreme piece, I would be managing the reaction to that, instead of building the context for everything else. And without the context, without all 14 names, and the reclassified records, and the Kellner manual, Patricia's statement looks like a single incident by a single employee. She met his eyes. One incident is manageable. A system is not. Damien looked at her for a long moment. "You've been thinking like a prosecutor," he said. "I've been thinking like someone who has watched things get dismissed," she said. Thinking like a prosecutor seemed like the safest response. He picked up his phone and called Elias back. "Get Wentworth on the line directly. Tell her we're ready to discuss the criminal referral pathway. And tell her we have evidence of camera system access from the manager panel timestamp verifiable through the hotel's IT infrastructure logs." He paused. "This goes to the DA's office today." There was a pause from Elias. Then, "Understood." It was 8:24 a.m. when Gerald Marsh arrived at the hotel. Carver had been tracking his car since 6:00 a.m., when Marsh had driven Victor Hale from his home address to a law office in the financial district that opened early for clients willing to pay the emergency consultation fee. Victor had gone in at 6:40 and come out at 7:55 with a lawyer named Brendan Holt. Beside him, a man whose professional reputation Damien recognized immediately when Thomas pulled the name. Holt specialized in employment disputes. He was expensive, effective, and specifically experienced in the area of institutional defense. Victor had called in the right kind of lawyer, but he had called him 8 hours after Damien Romano had already filed. Marsh walked into the Astoria Grand at 8:24 a.m. as if the morning were normal. He was dressed in a suit. He was carrying his briefcase. He was moving through the lobby with the particular ease of a man who had managed this building for 6 years and had never once felt the ground shift beneath him. He got as far as the entrance to the administrative corridor before Damien stepped out of the conference room and looked at him. Marsh stopped. The ease left his body in a single motion, replaced by something that was not quite fear and not quite composure, and was trying to be the latter. "Damien," he said. His voice was exactly as smooth as it always was. "I wasn't expecting you this early. Is everything—" "Come inside, Gerald," Damien said. It was not a question. Marsh came inside. He sat at the conference table. He looked at Thomas, who was standing near the wall with a tablet. He looked at the documents on the table. He looked at Lily Carter, and the look he gave her lasted exactly 1 second before he pulled it back into neutral. But Lily saw it. It was the look of a man who had built a system specifically to ensure that someone like Lily Carter would never end up in a room like this one with someone like Damien Romano. The system had failed. "I want to be transparent with you," Marsh said. He had shifted into his professional register, the measured collaborative tone he used in board meetings and performance reviews, the tone that had worked on Damien for 6 years. "I'm aware there have been some concerns raised about HR processes. I've been planning to address them." "Gerald," Damien said. Marsh stopped. "We have Arthur Kellner's email chain," Damien said. "We have the original manual. We have your responses to it. We have 3 years of modification timestamps from the HR system. The communication logs between you and Victor Hale's prepaid number. The guest complaint closures signed under your authorization, and Patricia Wells's statement." He paused. "We also have the camera access logs from the night Patricia Wells was on the 4th floor." The professional tone dissolved. Not immediately. Marsh was disciplined. He held it for several more seconds than most people would have been able to. But the dissolution was visible to anyone looking closely, and Lily was looking closely, and she watched the exact moment Gerald Marsh understood that the architecture he had been maintaining for 6 years had been dismantled overnight. "I'd like to call my lawyer," he said. "That's your right," Damien said. "The Employment Law Commission's investigative hold has been active since 8:04 this morning. Your legal counsel will be informed of the scope of the hold when they contact the commission. Everything else will proceed through the appropriate legal channels." He leaned forward slightly. "But before you make that call, I want to say one thing to you directly." Marsh waited. "You used my name," Damien said. "You used the authority of my organization, the credibility of my properties, and the trust of my staff to build and maintain a system that hurt people who had no power to fight back. You did it deliberately. You documented how to do it, and you taught other people to do it. He paused. I am not a man who responds to that kind of thing quietly. Marsh made the call. His lawyer arrived at 9:15 a.m. By 9:30, the conference room had become something that resembled in its functional shape the thing Lily had been trying to build for 8 months, a space where the truth of what had happened was the primary document in the room, rather than the managed, reclassified, courtesy protocol resolved version that the system had spent 5 years constructing. Sandra Fitch arrived at the hotel at 9:47 a.m., apparently unaware that the investigative hold had already been placed on the HR systems she had been modifying until 5:07 that morning. She found out when she attempted to log into the database from the administrative office and received a commission access notification in place of her standard login screen. She stood in the doorway of the office for a long moment. Then she went to find a phone. It was Lily who found her there, not by accident, by choice. Lily had left the conference room when she heard Carver radio that Sandra was in the building, and she had walked directly to the administrative office, and she had stood in the doorway while Sandra stared at the commission notification on the screen. Sandra turned and saw her. The two women looked at each other. Sandra Fitch was 51 years old. She had worked in HR for 22 years. She was wearing her standard professional attire, conservative, pressed the uniform of someone who had built a career on the appearance of institutional reliability. And she looked at Lily Carter, 29 years old, a torn shoulder on her uniform from the night before, that she hadn't yet had the chance to change a bruise forming on her left cheekbone, and something crossed Sandra's face that was not easy to name. It was not remorse, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was recognition. You did this, Sandra said. I documented this, Lily said. The people who did it were already there when I arrived. Sandra looked at the screen, looked back at Lily. I followed instructions, she said. I want you to understand that. I was told how to process certain things. I was told it was standard protocol for sensitive. Sandra, Lily said. Her voice was not unkind. It was simply clear. Mia Okonkwo was 24 years old. She came to you with a formal complaint. She had documentation. She was thorough and she was brave, and she sat across from you in your office, and you handed her a paper that described what happened to her as a communication misunderstanding due to cultural differences. She paused. I need you to sit with what you just told me, that you followed instructions. And then I need you to sit with what it meant to be Mia Okonkwo when she signed that paper. Sandra said nothing. The commission is going to ask you questions, Lily said, about what you were instructed to do and by whom. The answers you give are going to matter, not just for you. She held Sandra's gaze. For the people whose records you changed. She left Sandra standing in front of the screen. The call from Patricia Wells came at 10:22 a.m. Lily had given her number to Elias's associate, who had contacted Patricia through a formal channel that morning. Patricia had asked for Lily's number directly. Elias's associate had called Lily first to confirm permission. When the phone rang, Lily stepped into a quiet corner of the corridor. She answered on the second ring. Ms. Wells. Lily. The voice on the other end was older, measured, with a steadiness in it that Lily recognized immediately, the steadiness of someone who had chosen at some point to stop being afraid of their own story. Yes, it's me. A pause. The young woman from the association told me she said there's a formal investigation, that my account is part of it. Another pause. She said there are others. Yes, Lily said. There are others. How many? Across 3 hotels, 47 documented cases, 31 employees, 11 guests. She paused. You're not alone, Ms. Wells. You were never alone. They just made it feel that way. The line was quiet for a long time, long enough that Lily checked to make sure the call was still connected. Then Patricia Wells said, My daughter told me I was brave for writing it down. I told her I wasn't brave, I was just tired of being quiet about it. A beat. Is there a difference? I think sometimes tired is the beginning of brave, Lily said. Another pause. I never used that gift card. Patricia said. Her voice had shifted slightly, not heavier, but more direct in the way of someone who has decided to finish what they started. I kept it. I don't know why. I think I wanted to remember what they thought I was worth. Lily closed her eyes for 1 second. You're worth a great deal more than that, she said. What you wrote down is one of the most important things in that file. Because of the detail you remembered about the camera light. Because of the timestamp. Because of the way you wrote it like an accountant. She paused. Like someone who knew that the details were going to matter. I didn't know they were going to matter, Patricia said quietly. I just wrote down what I saw, because it was the truth. And the truth felt like the only thing I had left to give. Lily's throat tightened. She did not let it show in her voice. That was enough. What you gave was enough. It was Victor Hale's lawyer, Brendan Holt, who made the first unexpected move of the morning. At 11:15 a.m. Holt arrived at the conference room with Victor and requested a direct conversation with Damien. Not through intermediaries. Directly. Damien agreed. Lily stayed in the room. She had not been asked to leave, and she had not volunteered to leave, and Damien had made no indication that her presence was anything other than appropriate. Holt was a professional. He came in with the composed, calculating neutrality of someone who had made a career of managing exactly this kind of situation. He acknowledged the documentation. He acknowledged the investigative hold. He acknowledged with measured precision that the scope of what Thomas's team had uncovered was significant. And then he said, "My client has information about the origin of this system that does not appear in any of the documents you've currently recovered." The room was quiet. Damien looked at Victor. Victor Hale was not the man Lily had seen in the maintenance corridor. That man had been confident in the way of someone who had never encountered a consequence. This man was afraid, not panicked. Victor Hale was too controlled for panic, but genuinely functionally afraid in the way of someone who has realized that the floor beneath them is not where they thought it was. "What information?" Damien said. Holt placed his hands flat on the table. "My client was recruited into this position specifically because of the system that was already in place. He was shown the Kellner manual before his first day of work. He was told it was the operational standard for the property. He was told it had been approved at the organizational level." He paused. He was told the system ran all the way to the top. Damien's expression did not change. "What does that mean?" Damien said, "All the way to the top." "My client was shown a communication," Holt said. "A single document, which he retained a copy of." He looked at Damien steadily. "It is a directive on Romano Organization letterhead, authorizing the complaint management protocol as standard operating procedure across all hotel properties." The silence in the room was total. Lily felt her pulse change, because what Holt was describing was not just Victor Hale having been recruited into an existing system. What Holt was describing was a document that bore Damien Romano's organizational authority, whether Damien knew about it or not, being used to give the entire structure its ultimate protective cover. Damien's jaw was set. "Show me the document," he said. Holt produced it. It was a single page. Romano Organization Header. Formatted like a standard organizational directive. Date stamped 4 years and 7 months ago. And at the bottom in the signature block, not Damien's signature. A signature Damien recognized because he had seen it on 100 legitimate documents over the years. Arthur Kellner, who had been granted organizational signatory authority during his time as executive director, who had used that authority to issue a directive under the Romano organization's name, who had then left the organization cleanly with a reference from Damien himself before any of it could surface. Damien held the document for exactly 10 seconds, then he set it down. "Thomas," he said. Thomas was already typing. "I'll have a forgery analysis started within the hour. If Kellner used the organizational template without board authorization, it'll show in the document metadata." "He didn't forge it," Damien said. His voice was flat. "He had signatory authority. The document is real. The authorization behind it was not he didn't have board approval for this category of directive. But the document itself will authenticate." He looked at Holt. "Your client was shown a real document that was issued through fraudulent authority, which means he was lied to about who authorized this." That's what he's prepared to testify to, Holt said. Does he understand, Damien said, that testifying to being deceived does not undo the things he did after he was deceived? Holt was quiet. Victor spoke for the first time. His voice was different from the corridor, smaller, but not entirely without the particular quality that Lily had learned to identify as the voice of a man who had lived for a long time inside the belief that he would always find a way to come out ahead. I didn't build the system, Victor said. No, Lily said. He looked at her. She was looking back at him with the level, unhurried directness of someone who had been afraid of him for a long time and had stopped. You didn't build it, she said. You chose to run it. Every single time someone came to you for help, and you made them smaller, instead you chose it. Nobody held a gun to you. She paused. The 14 people on my list didn't get to choose. You chose for them. Victor looked at her for a long moment. He opened his mouth. He closed it. Whatever he had been about to say, he thought better of it. Holt put a hand briefly on Victor's arm, a professional signal that meant stop talking. Victor stopped talking, and Lily Carter turned back to the documents on the table because there was still work to do, and she had never once in this entire night allowed what she felt to stop her from doing it, and she was not going to start now. Outside, the city had fully woken up. The morning was moving. People were going to their jobs and their schools and their appointments, living the version of the day that had nothing to do with what was happening in this room. But in this room, the architecture of 5 years of deliberate harm was being taken apart, piece by piece, name by name, document by document. And the woman who had started with 14 names on a handwritten page was still at the table. Still working. Still there. The DA's office called at 12:47 p.m. Lily was sitting at the conference table with a cup of coffee. She had finally allowed herself to drink real coffee from the hotel kitchen, brought in by a junior staff member, who had looked at her with the wide, careful eyes of someone who understood that something significant was happening in this building today, but did not yet know the full shape of it. She wrapped both hands around the cup and listened while Damien took the call on speaker. The assistant district attorney's name was Renata Cruz. She had been briefed by Judge Wentworth's office that morning, had spent 2 hours reviewing the documentation package Thomas's team had submitted, and had spent another 40 minutes on the phone with Elias. Her voice was the voice of a person who had seen a great many things and had learned to keep her reactions professional without losing the human understanding of what those reactions were responding to. Mr. Romano, she said, I want to be direct with you. What your team submitted this morning is one of the most thoroughly documented institutional suppression cases my office has received in recent memory. The camera access logs alone, combined with the victim's statement, establish criminal intent beyond what we typically see at this stage of an investigation. A pause. We're moving forward. Victor Hale will be formally charged. Gerald Marsh is under criminal investigation for his role in the suppression and for his authorization of complaint closures that were in effect obstruction of what should have been reportable incidents. Arthur Kellner is being located. Damien said Patricia Wells. Her statement is central to the criminal case, Cruz said. We will need her participation, but nothing happens without her explicit consent and full understanding of what participation means. We handle victim involvement carefully. She will have a dedicated advocate from our office, and she sets the pace. A pause. Mr. Romano, I'd like to speak with Lily Carter directly if she's available. Lily set her cup down. I'm here, Ms. Carter. Cruz's voice shifted slightly, still professional, but with a directness that acknowledged Lily as a primary, not a peripheral party to this situation. I've read your documentation. I want to say to you clearly, and on the record, the methodology you applied over 8 months is the reason this case is prosecutable today. The encryption, the timestamp discipline, the way you built corroboration into every account before including it. This is the work that makes it impossible for a defense team to argue fabrication. You built something that holds. A beat. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Lily was quiet for a moment. I built it because I was afraid it wouldn't be enough, she said. It's enough, Cruz said. It's more than enough. The call ended at 1:04 p.m. The room was quiet for a long moment after. Thomas was at the far end of the table, reviewing documents. Damien was looking at his phone at something he did not immediately share. Lily sat with what Renata Cruz had said and let it move through her without immediately categorizing it or filing it away for later or converting it into the next functional action she needed to take. She just let it be true for a moment. It's enough. It's more than enough. 8 months. 14 names that had grown to 31. 3 hotels. 5 years of a system that had been designed above all else to ensure that nothing was ever enough, that every complaint was too thin, every account too subjective, every complainant too compromised or too afraid or too alone to constitute something that had to be addressed. She had known somewhere under everything that this was what she was fighting. Not just Victor Hale, not just Gerald Marsh or Arthur Kellner or Sandra Fitch. She had been fighting the specific suffocating architecture of being told that what she had was not sufficient. That the truth she was holding was not the right shape, not the right weight, not delivered through the right channels or by the right kind of person. She had built something anyway, and it had held. Damien looked up from his phone. His expression had changed in the subtle way it sometimes changed when information arrived that required real-time recalibration. "Arthur Kellner," he said. Lily straightened. "They found him. He found us." He set the phone on the table. "His attorney contacted Elias 20 minutes ago. Kellner is in the city. He has been in the city since yesterday morning." He paused. "He came back." Thomas looked up from the documents. Lily said, "He knew." "He knew something was moving," Damien confirmed. People who build systems like the one he built spend years watching for the particular kind of movement that means the system is about to be exposed. Whether he had someone inside who tipped him, or whether he simply tracked the pattern he knew. His jaw set. And he came back rather than running, which tells you something about how confident he is in the story he's planning to tell. "What story?" Lily asked. His attorney's opening position is that Kellner built the complaint management protocol as a legitimate operational tool designed to streamline HR processes and reduce litigation exposure for the properties. That it was a professional methodology. That any harm that resulted from its implementation was the result of misuse by the people he delegated it to, not the intent of the protocol itself. Damien's voice was completely flat. He's going to argue that Victor Hale and Gerald Marsh perverted a legitimate system. The room processed this. Then Lily said, "Can he make that argument hold? With a good lawyer and a sympathetic reading of the surface documentation, some of it maybe. Temporarily." Damien looked at her directly. "Not with the email chain, not with the sentence he wrote to Marsh. The key is that it never looks like a system. The moment it looks like a system, it becomes evidence." He paused. "A man who builds a legitimate operational tool does not write instructions for how to make sure it doesn't look like what it is." "No," Lily said. "He doesn't." Thomas set down the tablet he was holding. "There's something else." Kellner's attorney mentioned in passing that his client would be prepared to provide testimony about the broader scope of the protocol's distribution. He looked at Damien carefully. He used the phrase, broader scope. I don't think he meant the 3 properties. The air in the room changed. Damien was still for 3 full seconds. "How many properties does the Romano organization operate in the hospitality sector?" Lily asked. She asked it quietly because she already understood that the answer was going to matter and that the answer might be large. 11, Damien said. "And you've confirmed the protocol in 3, she said. "Which means Kellner is suggesting he can speak to some or all of the remaining 8. Or he's bluffing," Thomas said, using the suggestion of a larger scope to buy himself cooperation leverage. "Either way," Damien said, "we have to know." He picked up his phone. "Thomas, I need the archive sweep extended to all 11 properties today. Prioritize the ones where Kellner had any direct contact, any consultative relationship, anyone who worked under him at any point." Thomas was already moving. Lily watched Damien make 3 more calls in quick succession, each one precise, each one activating a different part of the infrastructure. He had been building, apparently, for exactly the kind of moment when everything needed to move at once. She had seen him operate under pressure for the past 12 hours, and she had formed a clear understanding of what he was, Not a man who was calm, because nothing touched him, but a man who had trained himself to function best precisely when the stakes were at their highest. It was the same thing she realized that she had trained herself to do, just through entirely different circumstances. At 2:15 p.m., Sandra Fitch's attorney called the commission and indicated that his client wished to make a full cooperative statement in exchange for consideration in the formal proceedings. The commission notified Elias. Elias notified Damien. Damien told Lily. Lily said nothing for a moment. Then, what does she know that she hasn't already documented in the record? That's what the commission is about to find out, Damien said. Sandra's cooperative statement, which Thomas's team received a summary of at 3:40 p.m., contained three things that had not been in any of the archive documentation. The first was a confirmation that she had received verbal instructions from Marsh, that she had deliberately not committed to any written communication instructions that established clearly that complaint reclassification was not her professional judgment, but a directive she had been ordered to execute and threatened with professional consequences for failing to execute. The second was the existence of a secondary HR filing system, a shadow archive that she had been required to maintain off the hotel's primary server, containing the original unmodified versions of every complaint record she had altered. She had kept the shadow archive, she said in her statement, because she had always known that one day she would need to prove that the original record existed before she changed it. It was her insurance policy. It was the thing she had held on to for 4 years in the private knowledge that she was doing something wrong and that she needed to be able to show if the moment came that the wrong was not something she had originated. The shadow archive contained 47 complete unmodified original complaint records, every one of them. When Thomas confirmed the existence of the shadow archive and its contents at 3:47 p.m., Lily stood up from the table for the first time in 2 hours. She walked to the window. She pressed one hand flat against it and looked at the city outside the afternoon light, the movement of people on the street below, the ordinary machinery of a day that had no idea what was happening in this room. She did not cry. She had not cried through any of this, not in the maintenance room, not in Damien's car, not through any of the past 15 hours of documentation and phone calls and carefully maintained functional control. But her hand on the window was not entirely steady. Damien came and stood beside her, not close, not speaking, just present in the way that a person who understood the weight of a moment could be present without making it about themselves. After a moment, she said, "Sandra knew the whole time." "Yes," he said. "She changed the records and kept the originals, for 4 years." A pause. She was protecting herself, but she was also... She stopped, reconsidered. She was making sure the truth had a copy, even when she was the one burying it. "People are rarely one thing," Damien said. She turned and looked at him. "Did you know that when you started tonight, or did you learn it along the way?" "I thought about it honestly. I knew it. I didn't always practice it." She nodded. She turned back to the window for one more moment. Then she turned away from it entirely and went back to the table. Because the shadow archive meant something specific and immediate and urgent. Every person whose complaint had been altered now had access to the original version. Every reclassification could be reversed. Every modified record could be restored to what it had been before the system touched it. Mia Okonkwo's complaint. The first one, the one Sandra had been modifying just hours ago before the hold activated, existed in its original form. Complete. Unaltered. The account of a 24-year-old woman who had documented a harassment incident with the thoroughness of someone who had been told her whole life to be prepared because the world did not give people like her the benefit of the doubt. It existed. It had always existed. Someone had just been hiding it. The third item in Sandra's cooperative statement was a name. Not Kellner, not Marsh, not anyone already in the record. A name Damien recognized instantly as belonging to someone currently serving on the Romano organization's board of directors. A man named Clifford Haynes, who had been on the board for 7 years, who had voted to approve Gerald Marsh's appointment as executive director of the Astoria Grand, and who had, according to Sandra's statement, attended a single meeting with Marsh and Kellner 3 months before Kellner's departure from the organization. Sandra had not been in the meeting, but she had been the one to prepare the conference room for it. She had seen the attendees. She had heard through a door that was not entirely closed enough of the conversation to understand that what was being discussed was not a transition plan for hotel management. It was a continuation plan. Clifford Haynes had known. He had sat in a room with the men who built the system and had at minimum allowed it to continue. At maximum, he had been party to it from the beginning. When Damien read Sandra's statement and reached that name, he set the paper down with a deliberateness that Lily recognized as the specific controlled stillness of a man who was furious in a way that had nowhere immediate to go. "Haynes has been on my board for 7 years, Damien said. "Yes," Thomas said. "He voted on executive appointments. He had access to organizational financials. He attended strategy meetings." Damien's voice did not rise. It never rose. It simply got quieter, which Lily had learned was the version of him that people should be most attentive to. "He sat across from me in this building and advised me on the direction of my organization while he knew what was being done in my properties under my name." Lily said, "Are you going to confront him?" "No," Damien said. "I'm going to let the DA's office confront him, because what I would say to Clifford Haynes right now is not something that belongs in a legal proceeding." He paused. "And I want what happens to him to hold up in court." He made the call to Cruz's office directly. They received the information about Haynes with the focused, unhurried efficiency of people who had already been moving on this case all day and had built the capacity to absorb additional scope without losing momentum. Cruz herself called back within 20 minutes to confirm that Haynes would be contacted formally by the DA's office that evening. "One question," Cruz said before ending the call. "The board member, did he have signatory authority over any of the HR systems or complaint processes in the hotel properties?" Damien checked with Thomas. Thomas confirmed no direct system access, but board-level approval over executive director performance reviews, which were the mechanism through which Marsh had been consistently rated as high-performing despite the system he was running. Cruz took that in. "Good. That establishes the chain of knowledge at the board level." A beat. "Mr. Romano, I want to say something to you as well. Your organization's name is on every document in this case. That's going to be public. The press is going to cover this. The nature of your other business interest will come up." She paused. "I want to ask you directly, is there anything in the scope of what you've submitted to this office that you want me to know before it becomes a matter of public record?" Damien did not hesitate. "Everything I've submitted is accurate. Everything my team found I provided. If there are additional records in other properties, I've ordered a complete sweep, and I will provide whatever is found. I'm not managing this disclosure. I'm opening it." Cruz was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's the answer I needed." The press arrived at the Astoria Grand at 4:30 p.m. Not because anyone had tipped them. The investigative hold on the HR systems had generated a public filing record that a court reporter had picked up in the early afternoon. By 4:30, there were 2 news vans on the street outside, and a reporter from the city desk had called the hotel's public relations contact. Damien's communications team handled the initial contact. He prepared a brief statement, not a denial, not a minimization, not the kind of carefully worded non-answer that institutions produced when they were trying to manage a story rather than tell the truth of it. It was a statement that acknowledged the investigation confirmed his cooperation and said in clear language that what had been found was unacceptable and that the people responsible would be held to full account. Lily read the statement when his communications director sent it for review. "You're not softening it," she said. "No. Your lawyers are going to say you should." "They already have," he said. I disagreed. She handed the statement back. "It's the right call." "I know." At 5:00 p.m. Lily finally left the conference room. Not because the work was finished. The work would not be finished for months, possibly years, as the legal process moved through its necessary stages, but because she had been in the building for nearly 14 hours, and her body had begun to register things that her mind had been overriding since approximately 3 a.m. Her shoulder hurt where Victor had grabbed her. Her cheek, where the bruise had fully settled into its color, throbbed steadily. She was exhausted in the specific total way that came not from physical exertion, but from the complete sustained deployment of every cognitive and emotional resource a person possessed. She went to the staff locker room, her locker room, the one she had used for 14 months, and she changed out of her torn uniform into the spare clothes she kept in her locker for the nights when shifts ran long or something got spilled. She sat on the bench in front of her locker for a moment, with her hands in her lap. She called Marcus. He answered immediately. "Lily, what's happening? I've been watching the news." "You're watching the news. There are news vans outside the Astoria Grand. Somebody posted a clip." A pause. "Are you okay?" Yes, she said. And then, because it was Marcus, and he would know if she wasn't being accurate, "I'm tired, but yes, I'm okay." "What happened? Can you tell me?" She thought about how to answer that. She thought about the maintenance room, and Patricia Wells and Rosa's sealed envelope, and Sandra Fitch's shadow archive, and the email in which Arthur Kellner had written, "The moment it looks like a system, it becomes evidence." "I turned a system into evidence," she said. A pause. "That sounds like you," Marcus said. She laughed. It surprised her, the laugh coming up through the exhaustion, and the throbbing, and the weight of the day, arriving with the particular quality of something genuine and involuntary and real. "How's Grandma?" she said. "She's fine. She made rice. She wants to know when you're coming home." He paused. "She also wants to know if you ate anything today." "I had coffee." "Lily." "And half a sandwich around 2 o'clock." "That's not—" "I know," she said. "I'll eat when I get home. Tell Grandma I'll be there by 7. She ended the call. She sat for one more moment. Then she stood up, squared her shoulders, and went back out. Damien was in the corridor when she came out of the locker room. He was on the phone, but ended the call when he saw her. He looked at her with the direct assessing attention he had given her from the beginning, the attention that did not perform concern, but simply paid it. "You should go home," he said. "I know, I will." She looked at him. "Is there anything left that requires me here today?" "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow." A pause. "Thomas will coordinate with you on the victim outreach process. We'll go through the list of names together in whatever order and at whatever pace you determine is appropriate." He met her eyes. "You're the one they trust. That doesn't change because lawyers are involved now." She nodded. "There's something I need to say to you," she said. "All right. When I was in that room tonight, the maintenance room, I had already decided that nobody was going to help me. I had built 14 months of evidence toward the conclusion that the system was too strong and too old and too interconnected to be moved by one person." She paused. "I had already started writing the version of the story where I finished my nursing program and left and spent the rest of my life knowing what happened to those people and knowing I couldn't stop it." Damien was quiet. "I don't know why you stopped," she said. "At that door. You could have walked past. Most people would have walked past." "Most people don't own the building," he said. "That's not why you stopped," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "No," he said. "It's not." "Why then?" He thought about it with the same honesty she had come to expect from him, the honesty of a person who did not perform answers, who arrived at them through actual consideration. "Because someone was breathing wrong behind a door," he said. "And I've spent my life in buildings where the most important things were behind the wrong doors. And I've learned not to walk past them." He paused. "And because you asked me not to call security. And the way you asked it, the specific thing you were afraid of, told me everything I needed to know about what was actually happening." She nodded slowly. "You saw it," she said. "You made it visible," he said. "There's a difference." She considered this. "I'm going to think about that for a long time." "So am I," he said. She put out her hand. He shook it. Not the handshake of a transaction completed, but of something else. Something that acknowledged what had passed between them across 15 hours and a maintenance room floor, and a USB drive, and 47 names that were now being carried by a legal process large enough to hold them properly. She left the hotel at 5:23 p.m. The news vans were still outside. A reporter recognized her as she came through the main entrance. Someone had apparently been thorough in identifying the key figures in the story and called her name. She stopped. She had not planned to stop. But something in her decided in the moment that there was a version of this where she walked past the cameras and the story got told without her voice in it. And that version was not the one she was choosing anymore. She looked at the reporter. A woman about her own age with a recorder held out and the focused, expectant energy of someone who understood that the next 60 seconds might matter. "Can you tell us what happened inside?" the reporter asked. Lily thought about Mia Okonkwo at 24 years old, signing a paper she didn't fully understand in an HR office. She thought about Rosa keeping an envelope in a storage unit for 2 years, writing on the outside, in case someone ever asks. She thought about Patricia Wells, 61, traveling alone for the first time, noting the color of a camera light, because she was an accountant, and accountants wrote down the details, never imagining that a single observed detail would become the hinge on which a criminal case turned. "There was a system," Lily said. Her voice was steady and clear in the afternoon air. "In 3 hotels over 5 years. It was built specifically to make sure that when people came forward and told the truth about what happened to them, the truth was smaller when it came out than when it went in." She paused. "That system was dismantled today, and the people it was built to protect are going to be held accountable." Another pause. "And the people it was built to silence are going to be heard." The reporter opened her mouth to ask a follow-up. Lily said, "That's all I have right now." She walked to the curb. She called a car. She waited with her face in the late afternoon air, the bruise on her cheek visible, and unmasked her hands at her sides, standing the way a person stood when they had stopped apologizing for the space they occupied. The car came. She got in. Arthur Kellner was arrested at 7:15 p.m. at a hotel in the financial district where he had been staying since his return to the city. The DA's office executed the arrest with the formal procedural efficiency of people who had been building toward it since morning. His attorney had spent the afternoon constructing the argument that his client was a cooperative witness rather than a defendant. The DA's office had spent the afternoon ensuring that the evidence made that argument impossible to sustain. When Thomas sent Damien the confirmation text, Damien was alone in the conference room for the first time all day. He read the text. He sat with it for a moment. Then he typed back, "Good." Gerald Marsh was placed on administrative suspension pending criminal investigation at 8:00 p.m. Victor Hale was formally charged at 8:45. Sandra Fitch received her cooperation agreement at 9:10. Clifford Haynes received a call from the DA's office at 9:30 that his attorney would later describe as the most significant phone call his client had ever received. Damien Romano spent the evening in the hotel, not in the executive suite, but in the administrative offices, reviewing the sweep results from the remaining 8 properties. Of the 8, Thomas's team found evidence of the Kellner Protocol in 2 additional locations, bringing the total to 5 properties, and a scope that was going to require months of systematic remediation. He did not minimize what the sweep found. He did not ask Thomas to present it in a way that reduced its apparent size. He read every page. At 10:30 p.m. he called Elias and instructed him to begin the process of establishing a formal independent oversight board for HR functions across all Romano organization, hospitality properties, a board with authority to receive complaints directly, independent of property management, with guaranteed anonymity protections and mandatory response timelines. He wanted it structured so that no single manager at any level had the ability to intercept a complaint before it reached independent review. Elias said, "That's going to be expensive to build correctly." "Build it correctly," Damien said. He made one more call that night, to a number he looked up himself through the contact information Elias's associate had provided earlier in the day. Patricia Wells answered after 4 rings, her voice carrying the particular quality of someone who had been waiting in some form or another for a very long time. "Ms. Wells," Damien said. "My name is Damien Romano. I own the Astoria Grand." A pause. "I know who you are," she said. "Then you know that what happened to you happened in my hotel, under my name." His voice was measured and direct with no hedge in it. "I'm calling to tell you that the man responsible has been charged, that your account was central to that, that what you wrote down the detail about the camera light was the piece of evidence that established criminal premeditation. He paused. And I'm calling to tell you that I'm sorry. Not through a letter, not through a gift card, directly, from me to you. The line was quiet for a long time. Then Patricia Wells said, "My daughter asked me today if I was glad I wrote it all down, the account." A pause. I told her I wasn't sure glad was the right word. I told her I just did what felt true. I wrote down what happened because it happened, and because pretending it didn't happen felt like giving something away that I wasn't willing to give. Her voice was steady, unhurried, carrying the authority of a woman who had earned the right to speak exactly as slowly as she chose. But I'll tell you something, Mr. Romano. Being believed, having someone call me and tell me that what I saw and what I wrote and what I refused to give away mattered. She stopped. That's the right word. I'm glad. Thank you, Damien said, for writing it down. Thank Lily, Patricia said. She's the one who made me believe it was worth keeping. He ended the call. He sat in the empty conference room, where 16 hours earlier he had first understood the full size of what had been running under his name. The documents were still on the table. Thomas would collect them in the morning. The coffee cups from the long day were still at various positions around the table, marking the hours and the chairs and the people who had occupied them. He thought about a woman crouched on a maintenance room floor, holding a crumpled piece of paper against her chest, saying, "Please don't call security," with a voice that was both fractured and completely steady. He thought about 14 names that had become 31, that had become 47. He thought about a manual written by a man who understood that the only way to protect a system built on harm was to ensure it never looked like what it was. And he thought about the fact that it had looked exactly like what it was to one person for 8 months who had documented it with the precision of someone who had never once believed that caring about the truth was a reasonable reason to stop telling it. In the end, the most dangerous systems were not the ones that were hard to find. They were the ones that depended on people deciding it was not worth the cost to look. Lily Carter had looked anyway. She had built something that held, and the door she had opened, not the maintenance room door, but the one that mattered, the one that no keycard controlled, the one that the system had spent 5 years and 3 hotels and 47 names trying to keep shut. That door was not going to close again. That was not an outcome. That was not a resolution. That was a fact. And facts, as Lily Carter had always understood, were the one thing that no system, however carefully constructed, however broadly distributed, however expertly designed to make the truth feel small, the one thing no system had ever found a permanent way to bury. She had 14 names. She had not stopped at 14. And the truth she had carried alone for 8 months was now carried by a legal process, a criminal investigation, an independent oversight board in construction, a DA's office, a federal commission, and the public record of a city that now knew what had been done, and who had done it, and who had refused against every rational calculation of personal cost to let it stay hidden. That woman, that night in that city, she had opened a door, and she had made absolutely certain it would never be locked again.